pets and children forcing parents. Definitely relatable concepts. So the next team is from that side, right? Just to remind you all, each team gets 3 minutes for the presentation, okay? Just so that everything is properly crisp and direct.
Check. Okay, does that answer?
Yeah.
Alright, so we're Team Phoenix because we are rising from the ashes. So, anyway, the way in which we thought about it first of all is if we have any kind of communication campaign, it has to be scalable, whether it's parts of a city or a whole city or all the non-Indian cities. So, we figured out that the unit of the campaign should naturally be the ward, of which there are 198 in Bangalore, of course. And what we figured was we have different buckets in which we can run our campaign. So from left to right, first you have action. So this could be individual or collective within the ward. Second, you have engagements. These are where, as a result of this campaign, there is a specific engagement which occurs in a very strategic way. Third is the actual communication itself and the mode in which the communication is delivered. This is also very specific. And finally, we have a bucket called citizen science because we think that it's impossible to make progress on community engagement without citizens understanding science. So let me just quickly run through these. The first thing about the actions and engagements is that they are very, very specific and they are based on the knowledge which is created, for example, through previous studies, simulations, top-down, so on and so forth. So, for example, if you want to do something about dust, there is a specific action. And if individuals and collectives take that action, then the citizen science, which generates data in a cloud from low-cost sensors, which are calibrated, etc., will show them in their ward how much change will happen over a year. Right? So it's also grounded in data. The engagements are also specific. And for example, if you are engaging through social media, you can also count metrics of how much engagement is affected through a particular communication. We're thinking in terms of FM radio. We're thinking also in terms of strategic engagement into the education policy, which also ties in with citizen science. I should talk a little bit about the communication itself. So we thought of engaging engineering colleges, school students, legal awareness, within that ward. So we pick a sample and work with them. And in terms of citizen science, as I said, low-cost sensors, data, dashboard, but really the emphasis on experiments, which ties back to actions, and how do you, for example, work with school children so that they understand the problem with data. So that gives them grounding in machine learning and things like that at a very early age. They don't need to know those words, but they can start solving problems. How do we use this problem to create better outcome-oriented education, for example? Okay, so this is the blueprint, and I should say the stakeholders across all these, for example, in the weekly ward meetings which we want for air pollution, would include people like doctors, residents, so on and so forth. So the cross-cutting stakeholders.
Thank you. This is quite a detailed thought approach that you have developed in such a short time. Thank you. Your team is coming up now. And keep in mind the bad words.
We call our team Air Warriors. All our signatures are here. The first and foremost is knowledge dissemination without using the word knowledge. We said we have to create a data platform. See, in India, CPCB has data, SAFAR has data, state pollution control boards have data, NGOs have data, but we do not have a single common platform. So our first mandate is to create a simple, usable data platform whereby in the mobile app you will get your community pollution, air quality index, lead pollutant concurrently with the city pollution, so that you start getting empowered at information level. The next level is knowledge sharing for communities in terms of the best practices. In Gurgaon, certain other communities, Whitefield listing, Rising, my apologies, they've all created certain practices with which people have learned to get into curative and corrective actions by themselves. So we need to have a knowledge base whereby this is captured. It could be a web app or a mobile app whereby all such knowledge is shared for other communities to use. The third effort that we said needs to be done is there are RWAs and RWAs in India, and we heard about different agencies taking such initiatives. The question is, can we make it more entertaining? Can we make it more competitive? Whereby they get incentivized and get recognized by way of medallions by which they get to participate. Fourth, most important is, right all through the conference we've been talking health impact of air pollution. We do not realize that about 2 million people are dying in the country. The health cost due to air pollution is upwards of 1,50,000 crores per year. Documents are available in the Ministry of Health. Hence, there is a greater need for the doctor, paramedics involvement and the volunteers, individuals who have been impacted at a community level to come and share the knowledge. So that is the health impact amplification we call it. And the last point is create air melas on the World Environment Day, June 5. Thank you. That's our team effort.
So create what on June 5th?
Sorry?
Air
mela.
Oh, air mela. Okay, sure.
We are Indians, we love festivities.
Presentations are getting better and better. Now let's see what the final thing has for us.
That goes last. I think most of these ideas were covered. Everyone did a great job. One of the things we spoke about was incentivization of citizen action, and something we found is that unless citizens have a direct connection to why they're taking action, things aren't going to change. And so the different things we could do to incentivize, like some of the other things were having free health camps, which people spoke about, distributing masks, personalizing the issue, how it affects you, how it affects your health, your kids' health. The other thing was like showcase, once you bring citizens together, then to kind of take that back to decision makers to showcase the voting block and power of the citizens. The other thing that at Chatkararong, for example, we're doing is distributing masks to again kind of visualize the constituency of concerned citizens. Getting people involved in planting, gardening activities, rooftop gardening, having a distributed AQM network, citizen monitoring as people mentioned, finding innovative ways to engage kids in schools to help build their understanding, and overall to keep everything solution oriented so that we're not just talking about problems but also showing people what solutions they can implement. Yep. I always carry this. This is part of my campaigning. It's like, this is my dystopic chic look.
Our tea, coffee, refreshments now, and let's resume at 11:45. So yeah, see you.
Which way to go? Hello, my name is Sulekha Chattopadhyay. So we are going to learn about how to build emissions inventory. What I'm going to try and do is give you a short history of how California also moved from where it was till what it is today, and how emissions inventory is the bedrock of everything that we do in California. This one. I had the good opportunity to meet him when he used to visit Caltech, where I used to work in the environmental sciences department, and originally he is from the UK. So he would spend all his winters, which are really severe in England, in California, which has absolutely Bangalore-like weather. But this is something we all need to learn. For someone who spent a large chunk of his life in a wheelchair, to tell us that we should really stop complaining. So what do we do in California? We complain, right? No matter how much people tell you, we still complain. This is an example of how journalism is extremely important. We heard today in the morning how advocacy, yesterday evening we heard how citizen groups, everyone needs to come together. This was Los Angeles in 1967. This is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. People were really upset. They would hold placards saying various kinds of things. But you did not know where to go, whom to go to solve your problems. So that's what, then they started selling clean air. They were like, oh yeah, if the government is not fixing our air, let us start coming up with some nice new ideas and make some money out of it. Pretty soon you will realize that it is not a very good business model. If you are just sitting like you are right now, you're breathing 6 liters of air every minute. There's a bottle, can I just grab it? Yeah, this I think is 500 ml, half a liter. So 12 of these bottles of air we breathe every minute. You cannot put them on your backpack in any way at all. So that's not an option. If I'm standing, I need actually more. So I will probably not be standing in front of you. Then what do? We go to the best scientists. So Ronald Reagan was the governor, like the chief minister. And he said, well, the people are upset. My job is at stake as a politician. I will not get voted. Let me go to the scientists, and he went to the best. So at Caltech, Ari Hagenschmidt was studying perfumes, pineapple emissions, like the fragrance that you get. We call it emissions, but it's like agarbatti fragrance. He was studying that. And they said, here comes your chief minister or governor saying, hey, stop all that, figure out what's happening in the air. So he builds an air chamber and starts studying it. What he found was, it was automobile exhaust that was causing the emissions. But that was in the laboratory, right? What you need to do is, you need ambient air emissions, like we heard all day yesterday. So 2 research faculties from University of California at Riverside, actually I got my PhD from the same university, so it's kind of a weird coincidence. They said, yes, we are actually measuring the same chemicals that are in the ambient. So the governor was pretty happy, and he said, well, now we know what is causing the problem. He created the Air Resources Board, and he said, okay, you have the responsibility to protect health for Californians from air pollution. That's all. That was one sentence that he told them. And what do we do then? So we write regulations, we give incentives, we enforce our regulations, and we listen to the public. Listening to the public is our main priority. Nothing gets done without public input. Whatever you like, so every single one of you in this room, go tell all your friends and family, use your Facebook, use Twitter, use whatever social media you have. But let them know that their voices have to be heard. As a government agency, they can make rules and regulations, but what happens in your homes, they do not know that. So unless and until you let the policymakers know what you want done, they will take random crazy steps, and then you will be upset over it. They will say, okay, ban this. But what do? Your pollution is still not going to improve. So your input is extremely important. Do not get mad, do not complain. Make sure you write in a nice way. Because, as I said, nobody likes complaining people. And we did improve our economy. I think I used this slide yesterday, so I apologize if anyone has seen this before. This is what we need to do. now it's getting close to lunchtime, so I really want you all to take a nice good rest. You had a very heavy dose of air pollution, science, technology, media, community activism, so rest. But let's talk about food. It's almost lunchtime, right? 12:15. How many of you all are from Karnataka? Wow, okay. So I don't have to tell you how good this is. It is my favorite dish. But what do you need? How do you make it? Does anyone know how to cook this dish? Few of you all, right? Great, awesome. You need rice, you need lentils, you need vegetables, and you need spices. That's your inventory. What we don't see is actually emissions inventory is exactly like cooking. You have to figure out what you need and how much you need. There are certain things you need a lot. You cannot interchange your spices with your rice quantity. You have to keep them in proportion, but you need to measure them. So how do you do that? Where do you measure it? You have to measure it at the market where you buy it, right? So you got to measure the fuel that is produced. You also need to measure what's in the ambient. So when you're cooking, you're smelling it and you're checking it, whether it's getting done right or not. And then the final is when you actually taste it. So you have to be measuring at all three different places to have a good, delicious product, or clean air for that matter. So I've heard this a lot. Bengaluru is probably India's only garden city, and we really need to save it. And we don't have to save it for anyone else, we've got to save it for ourselves. But how do we do that? Every time, all day today and yesterday, you've heard, oh, there are so many sources of pollution. We really don't know what to do. Which one do you choose? Should you take buses? Should you encourage public transit? Should you use your own car? I mean, you have to go to work, you have to go to the movies, you have to go shopping. So what do? We have, and there is construction, you need a home to live. So there are nice new houses being built. We all aspire to live in a good house. And I am not even going to go to garbage burning. But we need an inventory. We really need to know what is going on in our air. So what that means is, let's now narrow down the focus only to vehicles. Because if you go in any urban environment, transportation is your biggest challenge. And I want you all to remember this slide really well. I'm going to come back to it. How many of us around here owns some kind of vehicle? A car, a bus is impossible, but a scooter. Okay, do you know what model year your vehicle is? Very few hands. How many know what color it is? Almost everybody knows, right? So see, that is what is needed. You need to know what model year your vehicle is. Do you know how much it emits? What is the Pollution Control Board standard for your car or your scooter? If we in the environmental community do not know this, do you think the average person on the street is going to know? Or your next door neighbor who is working at a bank or working in the telecom industry or working in the software industry, are they going to know? We have to know. We have to be responsible for what we are expert in. This is the information that we can always encourage, and this is not rocket science. You don't need technology to go to the moon to learn this. There is a sticker on your car when you buy it, or a sticker on your scooter when you buy it. When you go to find out what cost it is. All of us are interested in what it costs. But what does it emit? What model year is it? Is it second hand, third hand, brand new vehicle? We need to know those information. So next time any of you go to buy a car or a scooter or anything else, I would also like to say airplane, but I don't think so that's easily available. Make sure you pay attention to what it is. Does it have emission control devices on it? What do those devices do? Is it only for particulate matter? Is it for NOx? Is it for CO? A lot of emissions in Bangalore or any other city in India is unburnt hydrocarbons. The fuel does not completely burn. So there is a lot of carbon monoxide that is emitted. And you heard from the doctor today, what destroys your hemoglobin the most is carbon monoxide. I'm sorry, not carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. So you have to be aware of how much fuel is being burned. It costs your pocket. If your vehicle is not efficient, you are filling more and more petrol in it to go the same distance. Then the cases of overloading our vehicles, which is extremely common in India. We do not have the capability or we do not have the patience. I want to hear from you. We don't try to tell people, see, the person who's carrying so much extra weight, he is thinking if he makes only one trip and carries 500 kilograms of potatoes, he is saving money. He doesn't realize that actually his engine is deteriorating at a much faster rate. It is the job of people like us to educate them and make them aware of it. It is the job of the manufacturers to make sure that that engine gets derated when the load is high. So let me give you an example. In California, we have recently mandated diesel particulate filters. Recently in the sense it's more than 15 years. But along with that, what we do is we make sure that when the particulate filter is full to a certain percentage, if it's 60% full, let's say, your engine gets derated. That means that that driver cannot go any further at the speed he's trying to go to, or he cannot add any more load. He has to take his truck to a regenerative place, either a passive or an active regeneration. So these are technological changes that are required. Who's going to do that? It's the manufacturer who is going to do that. But who's going to demand it? It's we, the people who are going to demand it. So we should be aware of what technologies are available, what impact they cause, and how to implement them. Every time someone comes to us, our first question is, please come to us with all your complaints and your problems. Also add a page of solutions with it. Don't come to me with a problem only, because then it's going to just sit there. If you have a solution with it, I will think and listen, and we will all get together with 50 solutions. You can come up with a good hybrid solution. That was a good picture, wasn't it? I would like to be like that girl on the scooter. Anyway, so what do we measure? You really don't know. There are so many things that are going on. So we've narrowed down from all the sources to one transportation sector. So how about let's look at just the PM. I'm not minimizing the impact of all these others. How do you measure particulate matter or any kind of emission? What we do is we measure them in the laboratory. These are extremely expensive measurements, but they are also used for compliance and enforcement. And as you can see, there's that little fan in front. Oops, sorry. That little round thing, that's the fan, which actually simulates the air or the friction for the car as if it's on the road. And it's sitting on a dynamometer, which is like a treadmill for a car. I think all of us have seen a treadmill. I would not vouch or ask how many actually go jogging on it, because that's personal information not to be disclosed. And I have actually a small video to show you. This is how much time, this simulates how everyone in California drives. This is not a perfect simulation, because as you all know, we drive differently. This is an average type of driving style. What we do, what is called a cold start, that is when you start your car in the morning. When it's sitting there for a nice 8 hours or more than that, the engine is absolutely cold. That's what is called cold start. So we monitor those emissions for roughly 505 seconds. Then it runs as if you're driving on the street or a freeway. So you can see there are some places where the speed is increasing, some places it's stopped. That's because you're stopped at traffic light or just stuck in traffic. After that, there's a big gap in between. So what's happening to the vehicle there? One of the things that's happening there is, it's called soak time. Because we come to work, we never come straight, or if you're going back home, you're not going back home straight. You're stopping for coffee, or you're stopping to pick up your kid, or you're stopping to bring some groceries home, or you find a friend who is going home and your scooter is still running, but you're standing there and chatting. So that is called hot soak, because the engine is hot, but it's still soaking. These are just terminologies. You don't have to memorize them. Then you start again. So the start pattern here in the end is exactly like the cold start. There is no difference. But that's how we compare what would be the emissions if a car or a scooter, this is for a car. You can do that similar for any other vehicle. For a cold start and a warm start. Majority of emissions, from my perspective, what I see, even in California as well as here, are at the cold start emissions. In Bangalore, I think, and similar cities around India, the warm start emissions also contribute a lot. Because by spending more on the road and going to the doctor and paying the doctors, I think we keep them in business actually, instead of protecting ourselves. And I'm glad that the doctor is not here, because otherwise he will be upset, why am I talking against his profession? And this is why I say that zigzag trafficking is not right. The way, from what I hear, most Indian cars are equipped with catalytic converters. So any chemical engineers here? Anybody who studied chemistry? 12th grade? 12th standard? Okay, that much is enough. Anyone who studied mathematics for a little while? Okay. So what do we know? One thing we know is if you operate something at the right temperature, it will have the highest efficiency. Think about tea. Let's forget chemistry and mathematics. How do you make your tea? You boil water, right? So you put your gas on maximum. Do you leave it on 1 or 5 when you are boiling water? If you leave it on 1 and you add sugar and you add your tea, how will it taste? Come on. Nobody, everyone's hungry, sleepy, what's the deal? It's not going to taste good. It's not going to be tea. The same way, your catalytic converter has to be hot to even reach 50% of its efficiency. That's what is called light off temperature. This is the plot that is very useful to understand. So every time when you're traveling, your warm start emissions are not that hot. That exhaust is not very hot. It is not going to convert the hydrocarbons. So no matter what technology you use, unless and until you change the driving pattern, your pollution is not going to go low. So one of the things that you can take back to the Pollution Control Board, or I do not know who maintains traffic lights, to increase the distance between traffic signals. So you at least travel a certain distance before you go and stop. There's another thing that we can do. We had a lot of discussion yesterday on monitoring, and we don't have data, there is lack of data, we don't have information. There are so many flyovers on Bangalore roads. Just stand on one of them, hold your sensor down. Every time a truck or bus passes by, that's direct emission that you will be able to measure. That is emissions inventory. That is real world emissions inventory that does not cost much. The previous examples that I showed you in the laboratory, they are extremely expensive, but those are only for compliance and enforcement. This is for air quality modeling. We also heard some data being used from NASA. So those are regional studies, but these are local. What is happening right across? Suppose I have a house which is right across from the highway, and we buy that house so that we have better communication, but we don't realize how much pollution we are breathing. This is something that will tell you how much pollution you are breathing. Now comes to building the inventory. So I hope I've given you enough background as to how we are going to gather the data. These are the exact steps that we have taken in California. So what I'm trying to say here is, don't reinvent the wheel. What we've done, try to do similar things. Do not try to do the exact things. They will not work. I cannot wear a shirt of someone who is 300 pounds and 6 feet tall. That is not going to look good on me. The same way, what we've done in California will not exactly work for cities like Bangalore, but you can follow a similar path. So let's look at what all is on the road. We know what types of vehicles are on the road. Can we separate them by how many carry goods and how many carry passengers? Once we make that separation, then we can say, okay, let's focus only on the passenger part. Let's have another group who's focusing on the goods part. And then build an inventory, and you can have actual data to go to the policymakers. This is what most of the citizens come to us with. We do some amount of work, but majority of the work is done by scientists, research institutes, and citizen groups. That's exactly what you need. You need which area, whose neighborhood, whose house, which society, where is the pollution coming from. As I said, how many of you know your model year of the car? You know what calendar year it is? It's 2019. From 2020, January 1, start monitoring everyone you know who owns a vehicle. You can build your own inventory. In your own building, how many cars come, how many scooters are parked, find that information. How many of them run on fuel? Which is it? Diesel or petrol or CNG? I think CNG is still less here. But try to find out which fuel do they use. And separate it according to vehicles. Find out how they drive. What I mean by driving cycle is majority of us go from home to work or go from home to school. It's a very standard fixed driving style. How many traffic lights do you cross every day? How many of you all know? You cross 3, 5, 7. What we typically know is, oh, it takes me 2 hours to reach work. Or it takes me 1.5 hours to reach work. But why is it taking you 1.5 hours to reach work? There is traffic. But what is that traffic made of? That is what we need to know. That is the information policymakers need. So I'll give you an example for buses. In California, we have 3 types of buses. There's the regular bus, and what we have is an articulated bus. Like London or Mumbai has these double-deckers. I don't know if do you have double-deckers here? No. Okay. So for us, it's not double-decker, it's just stretch. It's like a train, basically, 2-cabin train. And then we have the smaller buses, which we call commuters or cutaways. So what do? We try and find out, we have a separate driving cycle for buses. You cannot use the driving cycle for a car for a bus, because obviously it drives differently. It has many more stops and many more slow speed driving, right? Because roughly what's the distance between 2 bus stops? Any idea? 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, half kilometer? Figure that out. because that is important. That is how you tell, oh, I do not want a bus stop right before a traffic light. This is what we did. There was a group in University of California, Los Angeles. They studied what would be the emissions from buses if the bus stop is moved from before the traffic light, from after the traffic light to before the traffic light. Sounds like a very simple study, right? It's a very simple concept. And why would you do that? Because if you have the bus stop before the traffic light, you're not backing up the traffic. If the signal is red and the bus is actually stopped. But when the signal is green and the bus is stopped, then you're backing up everybody behind you. So California tries to move majority of its bus stops before the traffic light. A very simple study, does not need high technology, does not need any machine learning, artificial intelligence, nothing. Human intelligence is the best intelligence ever. So we drive these buses on these, I'm digressing, but we drive buses on these standardized patterns, and we measure how much time it takes, what distance it travels, and roughly estimate what is the average speed. From that, you can estimate what is the emissions. Because your manufacturer will tell you they need a certification. So another thing in California we do is every single vehicle or equipment, if you have to sell in California, you have to get it certified from CARB. And that certification is for emissions. Every single year you have to renew your certification. That creates jobs because you have another industry created who's doing the testing, another industry created who's doing filing of those reports. So this is a huge job creator. Then how do you measure the emissions that you get? There are two basic factors that you need. One is how much does it emit and what would be its emissions over how long it emits. In case of vehicles, it is kilometers. In case of equipment, it will be in hours per day. So what I'm showing here is you need two measurements. That's it to build your emissions inventory. Why is it so complex? It becomes complex is when you have to also consider tampering, malfunctioning, and also malmaintenance. This is common all across the globe. None of us like to go to a mechanic and get our cars fixed or get our scooters fixed. If it's running, we'll try to run it until it dies or breaks down, not exactly dies. That's pretty much like how we abuse or use our bodies, right? We do not go to see the doctor every year. Unless you're really falling sick, you have a headache for 10 days, you have fever for 2 weeks, that's when we go to the doctor. Don't do that. The Pollution Control Board or CARB, we can only mandate certain things, but if you don't take these things in your own hands and fix them, you are the ones who are going to suffer. And it's a cumulative suffering. All of us are going to be suffering. So this is how you build an emissions inventory. So what did we do? For buses, we measured NOx, PM, and CO2. We split them into by fuel. Then you split them into model years. So that is why when I started with model year, it is extremely important. That's how your next regulation that we write, we check where can we go. Okay, if pre-2003 emissions are at this level, our next standard has to be stricter than that. So we tell the manufacturers that you have to be manufacturing better engines that will meet our newer standards. Here's a nice picture. As you can see, we have a very thin slither of zero emission buses. But we're providing more and more incentives, we are encouraging people. It takes time, but it can be done. And this is how you can do it. with the emissions inventory you generate, what policymakers need to know is how would the fleet change over time? If we eliminate gasoline or diesel vehicles, what are we going to substitute it by? And how fast can we do that? These are the more critical things that are required. So emissions inventory is actually the bedrock of anything you do. And I don't think this video will play. So what I'll do is give me 5 minutes. I'll quickly get the video. In the meantime, ask questions.
That is very different from how we have it here, because here standards are set at the central level, usually a closed door panel of experts are not in the public domain and very closely associated with the auto industry.
Yes.
So how did California, how did this decision making happen at the state level?
That's important one. So most of our meetings, we also have them with manufacturers, and yes, they are closed door, because these are discussions that you really do not want to get them out in the media or anywhere else, because these are things that are still fluid. You have not converged on any one solution. Manufacturers are worried about two things: sales and their stock market value, right? So when you and the citizens are worried again about two things: their pocket and their health. So when we are talking with manufacturers, we try, before going to them, we do research to find out what is the best available technology for emission control. So there is actually another group of, it's a .org, so it's not a non-profit per se, but they are manufacturers of emission control association. So these two groups, they are manufacturers of vehicles, but at the same time we have manufacturers of emission control technologies who talk to us. They are interested in selling their highest emission control technologies, and the way they improve or benefit is by forcing the manufacturers to implement those. So we try to bring those two groups together. If one says, oh, this cannot be done, then we say, look, here's what Mika is telling us. They are saying that these equipment are available. The next answer is, they are expensive. We cannot afford it. The common man will pay much more, which is true. But how much more? So let's say you go to buy a Nano, which is 1 lakh rupees, right? At least that's what it was advertised. So if someone goes and says, I want to buy a car which is costing 1 lakh rupees, but if I pay 2,000 rupees more per car to install an emission control device in it, I think majority of us would agree on that, because you have to cost it this way. The cost of the emission control device versus the cost that a person would pay in terms of lost productivity when they fall sick, expense to the doctor, and just discomfort. None of us like to have a sore throat and go to work or eat good basic alive. So you want to feel good. That is one thing. So these are the things that we concentrate on, and we heavily rely on basically research, manufacturers, and community. So that's how we improve our standards. And most of it is public information. Once we come to us, so before we decide the standard, we hold workshops. And that's where public can provide us input, and then it's finalized. We can set our own standards. The other 49 states can follow our standards. So legally, they can go with us. Just thank you. I was just making sure I'm on time. That is how it works.
Yeah, I can quote Indian example, or we're counting it on road.
So, excellent. So we count local ones. Then you have the state transport. So state transport buses are interstate, right? Every state will say, suppose Karnataka says we are going to have stricter regulations, like how California says we are going to have stricter regulations. Your interstate commerce might get affected. But then you can say you can only allow vehicles that are cleaner and meeting our standard to enter our boundaries. Tourist buses. There are a lot of tourist buses that operate in California, courtesy Hollywood or Disneyland, name it. So what do? We control how tourist buses operate. So that's how we build our emissions inventory.
So as far as bus is concerned, source and destination is fixed. But if I want to shift to cars,
right.
Now they are registered in regional transport offices. Some cars are registered here, lying in some other villages. Some are on the road. So in that case, when we build emission inventory to arrive at the emission on the streets, is it sufficient if we go by the registered vehicles, or we need to count it on the road?
So this is what we do. That is very true. That is a big problem. We actually develop our emissions inventory based on a maximum of 300 cars. You will be shocked. Yesterday I showed you we have nearly 30 million vehicles on the road. We test 300 cars. How do we do that? That's where modeling comes into play. That's where every single model year vehicle, how it deteriorates, what level it drives, all that data is with us. So when you go to register your car, you have to inform them what is your odometer, right? I do not know here, but there we have to let them know what the odometer level is, how many miles you've driven. Every year you have to register your car.
That's not
So
the
you
case
get
here.
that data from them.
No, that's not the case here. We registered for 15 years.
Right. So now that is something you can try to change, or what you can do is have that information shared amongst yourselves. Build a database. Let's say CSTEP decides to become the center of emissions inventory for Bangalore, and everyone once a year on your birthday. The way it goes in California is you go to register your car on your birthday. They'll send you a reminder right before your birthday. Your driver's license, it expires on your birthday. There is nobody on earth who forgets their birthday. So all you have to do is take a picture of how much you've driven, send that picture to CSTEP or any central location. It does not have to be the government. We do not do everything ourselves. We cannot. We are a group of 2,000 employees. Do you think we can do this all on our own for 40 million people? It's not possible. But you have to rely on everyone. And because it's the same air that we all breathe. So you can have one organization who collects the data. Citizens can voluntarily, all you are providing them is how much you drive. You are not going to be penalized for that. You are already paying the penalty in buying the fuel. So there is nothing that you are going to lose in that. So take a picture of your car license plate and your odometer, send it to some central location. They can build the inventory for you. Give them the model year.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Even in India, from the automotive, CNG, petrol, diesel, all are moving to e-mobility, which is based on battery and other things. So in one of the Instagram, I saw a top, very small portion which shows almost zero inventory. So going forward, situations are going to improve, at least from the automotive sector.
Right.
But then, do you think these batteries, will give rise to another set of problems, because finally it has to be, recycled, or that time, maybe there could be, another set of, pollution which could, be happening from these things. So have you done some research on those areas?
Yes.
Okay.
That's another slide. You can use it as I think quite a few households that I have seen, they have what is called an inverter. They have this Excite battery sitting there. Whenever power fails, you switch on use their car battery there. That's the second life of your battery. When it further dies, there has to be more research because most of these are solid, basically toxic metals. That work needs to be done. But we are not in the business of controlling what goes on beyond the air. Our job is to give you clean air. So we we have a very direct, targeted mandate from the people that you have to protect us from what is in the air. There is another agency that works on waste management and another agency that works on toxic substance control. They look at those things, but we do provide them that data.
The norms. This is true. Like emission norms are the sources for deriving the emission limit. I'm just asking this question.
Yes and no, both. So what we do is the way we test on their own. We don't even ask them to come to us for testing. They have to only provide us the data. But we also do on-road testing.
That is real drive emissions.
Real world emissions.
But we will be adopting that by 2023, after 2023.
Right. So what we do is, we don't always go and measure real world emissions. We provide funds to research organizations or universities who do real world measurements. And it's not just us who provides. National Institute of Health gives them money. There are other organizations, the federal government gives them money. So, or even some of the philanthropies, they provide funds. So there are two sets of data that you get. One is the compliance and enforcement data, and one is the data that you get in real world. The real world data is used for forecasting and modeling. But that provides you the framework of where your next compliance level should be. So that is how things get stricter and stricter. So there are two questions here. In 1 hour, this is a work of a large group of people over multiple years. But it is relatively simple. We live in the Silicon Valley of India. Majority of this is database management. So it's not impossible. So the way we do it is we collect a lot of data from various sources and use it either in MySQL or Access database or whichever language you like to speak. Or model, and then do the forecasting. How you get the data is important. What software you use to develop the database is probably secondary.
What's the unit of the emission factor?
Grams per mile for vehicles and otherwise grams per brake horsepower hour for off-road equipment.
And the activity level?
Pardon?
Activity level.
Activity is grams per so kilometers per day. Or tons per day is what we typically use.
So the distance we can.
Yes.
Vehicle kilometer.
Yes.
Vehicle mile grams.
Yeah.
Or that's
Data we get. Oh, we collect fuel data. So how much of fuel can evaporate while you are filling your vehicle? How much of fuel gets evaporated when it is stored underground in the tanks? That is all the fuel. We also measure what is the evaporation rate of the fuel in the tank in your car. We measure that. What are the emissions from the brakes and the tires of your vehicle? We measure that. Off-road equipment, paint, perfumes, anything that goes into the air is monitored. So PM comes later. Lead is a carrier. It is carried by PM, but focus on lead as best and as soon as you can.
I was wondering about the role of playing a role. There were citizens also playing.
Right.
I was wondering what the role of the citizens was in this case, both as a formal process as well as informal process.
So we have two types of processes. Formal process is when we are planning a regulation or we are planning to provide incentives. Even at the early planning stage, we hold workshops in various different communities. And we advertise that this workshop will be held at least 45 days ahead of time. So people can, plan their lives. If you need a vacation day most of the workshops for communities are held after work. So after 6 p.m., we work overtime without overtime pay. But we work and we go and present to them what is that we are intending to do. That is the informal way. That's where the community will come to us. Then there is also an open portal where communities can write to us. They can write, and we are very much responsible to respond to them on what they have written. You cannot ignore what the community has written to you or told you. We cannot just say, oh, I didn't hear, I don't think you called me. That doesn't work. If you get a phone call, you better respond in the next 48 hours. It could be that, yes, I'm looking into this matter and I will get back to you on so and so date. For example, right before I was about to leave, a citizen called me. She lives very close to Santa Monica Airport. That airport uses small aircrafts. Those small aircrafts have very low levels of lead in their fuel. And then, there are formal and informal ways. So you can call, you can write, you can come at our board hearings and testify. We are literally open to any kind of input. Because that helps us improve our process.
Ma'am, I had one. Even agriculture sector, a lot of methane and the livestock, generating this. Those doesn't come in your purview or how?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so that is one question. And second thing is the simulation environment you showed, where the car on a treadmill,
right.
Trying to ride, there's a fan, creating the wind flow. But does this capture, the real life scenario where there could be, so many other things, pollutants on the air, there could be chemical reactions which may be happening. So those, how do you factor those, additional factors in the real world environment in the simulation room that you were talking about?
That is, in California, farming is commercial. It's not like one family has a tiny little farm. Majority of them are commercial farms. Dairy farming is a big industry. Methane is probably way more potent than CO2 in terms of greenhouse gas impact. Then it goes to another agency, but otherwise, and we do collaborate very closely with interagency. So it's not like, oh, this is the toxic substance, my door is shut. No, if someone complains to us, even if it is not within our authority, like the example I told you, we point those people to the right place, and then if they come to us, then we basically try and follow up if things are working.
Just tell us a little bit about the role of technology in building an emissions inventory specific to the data collection process. I know you mentioned you encourage citizens to report information on their cars and their usage, things like that. Are you aware of any initiatives where satellite information, for example, tracks what types of cars are running around, any areas that are known for having open burning taking place? Is there a data collection process that can be automated? And if that can be done, do you think that can be validated and seen as reliable?
Yes. There are monitors, low-cost monitors, at various communities where they can transmit their data over the internet to our labs, and it gets posted online also, so the community can see them. And when you talk about satellite data, there are two things. Satellite data cannot have high resolution. It cannot tell you where your car or her car is driving on the street. That's where we sort of try and make use of Google Maps or any other GIS platforms. But what satellite data does for us is California has a large amount of wildfires. Like you have what is garbage and waste burning, which is still on a much lower scale. We have thousands of acres that get burnt during past summer session, and it's partly also contributed by climate change, but that is where we use a lot of satellite data, because that's where your plume, where it is and how the plume is being transported is what we get. However, naturally occurring air pollution episodes cannot be in our emissions inventory. I mean, they cannot be used for compliance, because you really cannot control when there is a wildfire. We are trying to work with the California Fire Agency to try and see if they can sort of make forced burnings of dry wood that is already there, that prevents additional fires from burning. or expanding. But that is a policy which is still in the works, because once you give authority to someone to burn, then how do you define whether this is controlled burn or uncontrolled burn? So you have to set norms for it, and those are very tricky. But we are definitely considering all that.
This is if I select my neighborhood, and then for emission factor, particularly to calculate emission factor is required. And emission factor would be dependent on the type of vehicle also.
Yes.
Right? Different vehicles will have different emission factor.
Right.
Now,
RAI in Pune who does emissions testing, they can have your emission factor data. I think IIT Madras has a dynamometer, so you could try and request them if they can simulate some, if you can have a vehicle tested there, although it may or may not be a certified type of, but it will give you some idea. If nothing works, hold a handheld dust trap, or I think CSTEP, get to that level when you reach California standards, where at times we have found ambient air is dirtier than the tailpipe. It's literally like cooking. You just need to know overall, does it taste good or not? You don't.
When we talk about emission inventory, and we also talk about source apportionment. So when someone looks which sector contributes and how much, and what we could normally see in the reports is that emission inventory, it says this particular sector contributes by about 1%. But when we look at the data on the source apportionment, it says 7%, 10%, sometimes 15%. There is a wide variation, the gap. So what is your view on that?
Emit something. These are direct emissions that you're measuring, but on the vehicle end or on your source end. But when you're doing source apportionment, you're going top down. You're measuring what is in the ambient and trying to trace it back to where it comes from.
You have mentioned most about the transport sector, but what about the other sectors like construction and the road dust, where we don't have a primary data source? And also it's very difficult to get the ground data, right? So in that case, how we can bridge the gap? And next is, say for example, NCAP actually sets target based on the PM concentration. So what do you think? Is it like if we need to reduce air pollution, do we need to set target based on emissions, or which one is better? Like emission targets were better, or like concentration targets were better? Transformation. So, like whenever I look at the data from the chemical transport model developed by one of the scientists, Dr. Saran, it says that a lot of the contribution is from outside the domain cells. So in that case, like from policy side, like how exactly the government can coordinate with other agencies, like for example, intercity coordination, how we can work on it.
What we tend to forget is, city A, which is next to Bangalore, is polluting my Bangalore city. What you forget is Bangalore is polluting city B, which is downwind. That part we forget. So what we need to do is monitor all the cities and try to find out what is the dispersion of them. So other question on construction. So construction, there are two things. One is the dust that comes from just the concrete being dumped, right? That's how construction is a big source of pollution. So that monitoring is already done, right? When it is the cement industry, they need to make sure that wherever or the construction company actually, they need to make sure, they need to submit to us what we call as an environmental impact analysis.
Wonderful presentation and a lot of insights on how to develop an emission inventory and what are the sources and how it needs to be considered for developing a holistic emission inventory for any city or state or a nation. Thank you so much, Dr. Saleka, for coming here and giving us such a beautiful insight on such a scientific topic. Yes. I'm sorry we'll have to that we'll have to scrap the group activities that we had planned as we are sharp 2 o'clock. Yes, for the other session on
Everybody
health
blame it on me.